to get to a poem by Schiller that's, I mean, probably his 3 greatest poems, and he wrote many, was An die Freude, Ode to Joy, The Artist, and The Song of the Bell, which makes allusions to the American Revolution, to the Liberty Bell, to Benjamin Franklin. But An die Freude, I discovered at this point, was this great work that Beethoven set to the Ninth Symphony. And it took Beethoven 30 years to compose this. And one of his students, Zerzny, quoted Beethoven saying that, you know, you shouldn't compose to poetry unless your music can rise above the poem and enhance it. And with Schiller, that's almost impossible, because his poetry is already perfect. He said with Goethe, it was much easier. That's not a slight on Goethe, because Schiller and Goethe were very close friends. And they lived together for a while, and they inspired each other. And when Schiller died of consumption or some disease at that time, at a very young age, 45, Goethe commented that half my soul went into the grave. He lived much longer. Oh, there's another little funny story about Goethe and Beethoven. Beethoven is, you know, the greatest example of a Promethean, Beethoven and Schiller, and it's almost impossible to mention one without the other. But Beethoven and Goethe were walking down the side of the street in Vienna, and it was the custom then that whenever a duke in a horse-drawn carriage would pass by in the street, that the commoners, you know, would bow like this. And Goethe was enamored of the nobility, apparently. And so they came by, and Goethe went down, especially far like this. And Beethoven grabbed him and said, "My dear friend Goethe, you got it all wrong. He should be bowing to the poets, not the other way around." So in any event, we are really honored today to have a friend who I just met recently, a good friend of mine's house, Aisha Mohammed Latif, who was born and raised in Germany and has lived over here for a while, and whose uncle was is one of 2 surviving members of the White Rose, which was a student underground secret movement that passed out 7 leaflets denouncing Hitler in the 1940s for his crimes. And some of their Jewish friends were disappearing, and they investigated and found out what was going on. And they said someone had to stand up to save the soul of Germany, even if it meant their death. So they passed out 7 leaflets all over Germany, and they were all executed except 2 of them, who were apparently too young, and they were put in jail. And one is the uncle of this lady I'm going to introduce you to, and the other was the co-founder with Ron Petru, who introduced me, of the Chicago Waldorf School. Now, the White Rose, I mention this because in the first leaflet, you can find this online, quoted Schiller, but I want to sort of give you a sense of this, and then we're going to get an extraordinary German rendition of the Ode to Joy. But this was the first leaflet of the White Rose, and I'll read you just a couple sentences. And the White Rose was led by a young teenager, 19, 20 years old, and she was a student at, I believe it was Munich, University of Munich, yes. And her name was Sophie Scholl. And in the 90s, there was a PBS special on the White Rose, and then later, there was a movie called Sophie Scholl, The Untold Story. Her brother started it with some other guys, Hans, who was trying to protect Sophie, but when Sophie found out about it, she just, like Joan of Arc, she just went forward and took the whole thing under her inspiration. But anyway, in the first leaflet, and they were guided by a professor of philosophy, who was a professor of Leibniz, I forget his name, but he too was executed when they were found out. And so in this first leaflet it says, "Nothing is so unworthy of a civilized nation as allowing itself to be governed without opposition by an irresponsible clique that has yielded to base instinct. It is certain that today every honest German is ashamed of his government. Who among us has any conception of the dimensions of shame that will befall us and our children when one day the veil has fallen from our eyes, and those horrible crimes that infinitely outdistance every human measure, reach the light of day? If the German people are already so corrupted and spiritually crushed that they do not raise a hand, frivolously trusting in a questionable faith in lawful order of history, if they surrender man's highest principle, that which raises him above all other God's creatures, his free will, if they abandon his will to take decisive action and turn the wheel of history and thus subject it to their own rational decision, if they are so devoid of all individuality, have already gone so far along the road toward turning into a spiritless and cowardly mass, then yes, they deserve their downfall. Goethe speaks of the Germans as a tragic people, like the Jews and the Greeks, but today it would appear rather that they are a spineless, will-less herd of hangers-on who now, the marrow sucked out of their bones, robbed to their center of stability, are waiting to be hounded to their destruction.